You won't believe what just went down in court today. Tiffany Henyard, once hailed as the super mayor of Dolton, experienced what could only be described as the most humiliating moment of her career. Cameras were rolling, the courtroom was packed to capacity, and the judge had barely finished reading the verdict when Henyard stormed out in dramatic fashion. It was like a scene ripped straight from a political thriller, complete with gasps, whispers, and the unmistakable air of scandal. But what exactly drove her to this public display of rage? Was it the mountain of corruption allegations finally catching up to her? Could it have been the embarrassing financial secrets that were laid bare for the world to see? Or maybe it was something much more personal, the fact that her own people, those she thought were loyal, had turned against her. For months, Mayor Henyard had been dodging accusations of lavish spending, shady deals, and power-hungry behavior. But today, it all came crashing down in the most spectacular fashion, and her exit was anything but graceful. Think angry stomping, furious whispers, and a courtroom full of gasps. So, what exactly went down inside those courtroom walls? What did the judge say that made Tiffany Henyard lose her composure so publicly? And most importantly, is this the beginning of the end for Dolton's most controversial mayor? The courtroom was packed, buzzing with anticipation as reporters, political analysts, and everyday citizens filled every available seat, eager to witness the moment when Tiffany Henyard, the so-called super mayor, would face the consequences of her alleged actions. This wasn't just another trial. It was a defining moment for a politician who had made headlines for all the wrong reasons. When Henyard entered the room, her once fiery confidence seemed to have dimmed. Gone were the flashy press conferences, the designer outfits, and the air of smugness that had once surrounded her. This was a different Tiffany Henyard, one who had been backed into a corner, desperately fighting to maintain control over a situation that was quickly spiraling beyond her grasp. As the judge took his seat, the room fell silent. Cameras clicked, pens scratched against notepads, and social media feeds were flooded with speculative posts about what would happen next. The evidence against Henyard had been mounting for months. Allegations of corruption, misuse of public funds, and abuse of power were no longer whispers but shouts that demanded answers. Initially, Henyard appeared composed, as if she still believed that this was all a misunderstanding or a political witch hunt orchestrated by her enemies. But as the prosecutor began detailing her transgressions one by one, her demeanor began to change. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her once unwavering confidence faltered as she glanced nervously at her legal team, who sat stone-faced beside her, clearly aware of what was about to unfold. The prosecutor wasted no time getting to the point. "Let's talk about the $43,000 Amazon shopping spree," the prosecutor began, listing one lavish expense after another. The first-class flights, the luxury hotels, the taxpayer-funded billboards with her face plastered all over town. Each accusation hit harder than the last, the weight of her alleged misdeeds becoming impossible to ignore. Henyard sat still, but her expression betrayed her internal struggle to keep her cool. The jury, a mix of local citizens, some of whom had once believed in Henyard's promises, watched her closely. Some wore expressions of disgust, others disappointment. This was a woman who had campaigned as a champion of the people, yet the evidence laid out by the prosecutor suggested otherwise. Then came the bombshell. The prosecutor revealed a new piece of damning evidence, documents linking Henyard directly to a series of backdoor deals that funneled public money into private accounts. Screenshots of emails, wire transfers, and secret agreements flashed across a screen in the courtroom, prompting gasps from the audience. Even some of Henyard's most loyal supporters looked visibly shaken by the revelations. As the room erupted into whispers, Henyard's legal team scrambled to counter the undeniable proof being presented. But it was clear to everyone in the courtroom, Henyard's carefully crafted persona as a fearless, untouchable leader was unraveling before their very eyes. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Order in the court," he said firmly. The murmurs died down, but the damage had already been done. The defense attempted to fight back, framing Henyard as the victim of a political sabotage campaign. They argued that the evidence was taken out of context, and that this trial was nothing more than an attempt to take down a powerful woman in leadership. But the argument fell flat. The evidence was overwhelming, the accusations too detailed, too damning. The prosecutor continued, painting a picture of Henyard as a leader who had manipulated the town's resources to fund her extravagant lifestyle. While the residents of Dolton struggled with essential service cuts, higher taxes, and crumbling infrastructure, Henyard was living it up on taxpayer dollars. The betrayal stung, and the outrage was palpable. Then came the final blow. A former insider from Henyard's administration took the stand. This witness, once a close ally of Henyard, had turned against her. In shocking testimony, they detailed behind-the-scenes corruption, threats against those who spoke out, and a culture of fear within the administration. What had once seemed like a political scandal now looked like the unraveling of an administration built on lies and intimidation. As the judge called for a recess, giving both sides time to regroup, Henyard shot up from her seat. Her hands gripped the table tightly, her face flushed with a mix of fury and desperation. Her lawyers tried to calm her, whispering urgently for her to remain composed, but Henyard was never one to sit quietly. She had built her career by controlling the room, by making herself the center of attention. So, in true Tiffany Henyard fashion, she snapped. As the judge stood to leave, Henyard bolted upright and shouted, "This is a setup! These are all lies! You just can't handle a strong black woman in power!" The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing wildly. The jury exchanged nervous glances while the prosecution stood quietly, arms crossed, watching Henyard unravel. Her outburst was the final nail in the coffin. Security moved in, urging her to calm down. But Henyard wasn't finished. "You're all going to regret this. You think I'm going down? I'm not going anywhere," she shouted as she stormed toward the exit. But as she reached the door, she was met by federal agents. The same agents who had been sitting quietly at the back of the courtroom stepped forward, blocking her path. For the first time, real fear flickered across Henyard's face. The lead agent held up a document. "Tiffany Henyard, we need you to come with us." The room fell silent. Even her most loyal supporters were left speechless. Henyard, who had once commanded every room she entered, now stood frozen in place, cornered by the very system she had thought she could outsmart. Her lawyers jumped into action, whispering urgently as they tried to negotiate with the agents, but it was clear that Henyard had no way out. Her bravado faded as the reality of her situation sank in. Federal agents flanked her as she was escorted out of the courtroom, cameras capturing every moment of her public downfall. As she walked through the courthouse halls, her head held high, her once unwavering confidence was now a mask for the humiliation she felt. Every step echoed with the weight of her political career, which was crumbling around her. This day, once filled with speculation, had turned into a defining moment, not just for Tiffany Henyard, but for the entire town of Dolton. Her story, once one of ambition and power, had become a cautionary tale of corruption, betrayal, and the fall of a politician who believed she was untouchable. As Tiffany processed the words, it became clear that this wasn't part of the plan. She had anticipated a difficult day, bad headlines, maybe even a tough ruling from the judge. But not this. Not federal agents waiting for her with a stack of official-looking documents. Her lawyers sprang into action, stepping in front of her, whispering urgently. "We need to leave now. Don't say anything," one of them muttered, trying to de-escalate the situation. But Tiffany wasn't one to back down. Clenching her fists, she squared her shoulders and shot the lead agent a defiant glare. "This is harassment, political persecution," she barked, her voice echoing through the hushed courtroom. The agents, unimpressed by her outburst, calmly responded. "Ms. Henyard, we need you to come with us for questioning. This is not an arrest. Yet." That single word, "yet," sent a jolt through her. Her mind raced. The judge hadn't even ruled yet, so why were federal agents here? She knew there had been investigations, but she was assured nothing would come of them. She had people on the inside, connections that guaranteed her safety. Yet here they were, agents from multiple federal agencies blocking her path. The reporters in the courtroom were already scrambling to capture the moment, cameras flashing as social media exploded. Within minutes, hashtags like John Henyard Meltdown and Sean Borean dominated the timelines as Tiffany's defiance played out in real time. Her loyal supporters, stunned moments earlier, erupted into chaos. Some shouted words of encouragement, claiming this was all a setup. But others slipped away, their faith in her visibly shaken. The once unstoppable force of Tiffany Henyard was now looking more like a liability than a leader. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, urging her to move. With gritted teeth and fire in her eyes, Tiffany stormed forward, flanked by the agents, pushing through the courtroom doors. The walk through the courthouse halls felt humiliating, each step heavier than the last as cameras followed her every movement. News anchors narrated the scene like it was a Hollywood thriller. "She came in expecting a victory," one remarked, "but she's leaving with federal agents at her side. This could be the beginning of the end for Tiffany Henyard." Outside, the reporters were ruthless. "Tiffany, do you have a statement? Is it true the FBI has a case against you? Are you going to resign?" Her face twitched with irritation, but she ignored them, knowing better than to give them another soundbite. She was focused on her next move, damage control. By the time she was escorted into the federal building, the narrative was already slipping out of her control. Her PR team scrambled, releasing statements that branded the situation as a political witch hunt, an attempt to silence a strong leader. But the leaks from inside the investigation painted an uglier picture. Allegations of intimidation, financial mismanagement, and secret offshore accounts. The more they dug, the worse it got. Within hours, a bombshell dropped. A leaked audio recording surfaced online, allegedly capturing Tiffany discussing ways to discredit her opponents. The voice was unmistakable. "They won't dare speak against me," it sneered. "If they do, we'll make sure they regret it." The recording went viral and social media exploded. Memes flooded in, comparing her to infamous corrupt politicians. Hashtags like #Henyard exposed and #Justice for City trended worldwide. While the internet had a field day, Tiffany's inner circle was in freefall. Her team scrambled to discredit the tape, claiming it was doctored, but the damage was done. Even her staunchest supporters began to distance themselves. News networks, once sympathetic, shifted their tone. "The walls are closing in on Tiffany Henyard," a primetime anchor declared. And inside the federal interrogation room, Tiffany, sitting stiffly with arms crossed, was finally starting to crack. The lead investigator flipped through a thick folder of evidence, bank statements, wire transfers, and damning emails, all pointing to corruption. She scoffed, forcing a laugh. "You have nothing on me," she sneered. But her confidence faltered when the investigator slid a bank statement across the table. A large deposit from a shell company tied to a government contract. Then an email exchange discussing favors for donors. Finally, a signed document flagged as suspicious. Her bravado crumbled. "You can keep pretending," the investigator said, leaning forward, "or you can start talking. Because right now, we have enough to take this all the way." For the first time that day, Tiffany had no comeback. Silence filled the room. Outside, the world had already moved on, preparing for the next chapter of the scandal. As the fallout unfolded, headlines blared the news of Tiffany's federal questioning. Political analysts dissected every detail, speculating on how deep the corruption ran. Some suggested she could face serious prison time. The city council quickly called a special session, streamed live, where once loyal trustees publicly turned against her. "This administration has failed our city," one declared. "We can no longer stand by as taxpayer money is squandered." Protests erupted outside City Hall, demanding justice. Tiffany Henyard, once one of the city's most powerful figures, was now being abandoned. But Tiffany wasn't ready to go down quietly. She released a video statement claiming this was nothing more than a politically motivated attack. Her voice was firm, but the public wasn't buying it. Within minutes, comments flooded in, demanding her resignation. Yet, instead of retreating, Tiffany doubled down, calling a press conference to blame the media and her political enemies. "They want to silence me!" she shouted. But reporters weren't letting her off the hook. "Ms. Henyard, can you explain the bank records? Do you deny the recordings?" She sidestepped their questions, but it was clear the tide had turned. Then came the final blow: her arrest. Late that night, the FBI raided her home and office, seizing documents and computers. The image of Tiffany in handcuffs went viral, marking the dramatic downfall of a once powerful figure. Charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, Tiffany now faced the possibility of over 20 years in prison. Her empire had crumbled. By morning, the world had moved on. Her political allies released statements about justice and accountability. Investigators announced more officials tied to Tiffany were under scrutiny. The city was preparing for new leadership. But even behind bars, Tiffany released one final message: "This is far from over. The truth will come out." Was it an empty threat or her last card to play? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the reign of Tiffany Henyard was over. So what do you think? Is this the end for Tiffany Henyard, or does she have one last trick up her sleeve? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to stay ahead of the curve on every scandal, hit subscribe. This story is far from over.